What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. I'm also going to break down some very important things that President Trump said that caused a lot of volatility in the markets. We have huge updates involving his tariffs I have to discuss. I'm going to read his quotes for you guys. I'm also going to give you guys my price predictions for tomorrow. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice whatsoever. Anyways, guys, to be very, very blunt, I think the market does have more downside risk for the next month or so out. Obviously, I do think SPY could eventually hit the 470s where our 200 EMA is, around where this resistance happens to be in the future. But before we dump all the way down towards like the 470s, we might get some temporary relief based off what I'm seeing on the charts because we're forming a bullish wedge on SPY, and this could be a good sign going into tomorrow and beyond. So yes, there's more downside in the future, but before the downside comes, there might be some temporary relief. I hope that's as clear as possible. So, looking at SPY, for example, if we lose the 500 area, there's going to be a risk of us dipping to like 494 or below. But if we hold this white trend line, if we could hold this, this is a bullish wedge, and this will give us a breakout towards the 520s or above. I'll be watching this very, very closely. On the triple Q, it's the same setup essentially, right? We saw this nice looking wedge. If we see the triple Q lose that 420 area, we could be dumping back down to 413 or below. If we hold the white trend line, however, we could be looking for an attempt to push for the 430s and back up to the 440s. So with that being said, what on earth is going on with the market so far? It was a very, very crazy day. The market got a big dump. We got a huge pump, a dump back down, and then we started to push towards the end of the day. Very mixed markets. We had tech very mixed. Some tech stocks were in the red, such as like Apple and Microsoft. But then we had Nvda and Amazon in the green. We saw finance being very, very mixed. And then we saw consumer durables a bit in the red. So very, very mixed markets, some green, some red. SPY and the S&P 500 were in the red, whereas the NASDAQ and QQQ were in the green. So like I said before, very, very mixed markets. So what's going on? We had this headline that came out that President Trump was supposed to announce that he's going to be delaying the tariffs by 90 days. We had a lot of headlines that said that, right? That's why we saw the QQQ bounce 40 points in the morning, going all the way up to 440. We went from the low 400s all the way up to 440. Then we came back down. That's why we saw SPY basically bounce all the way up to about 523. But then, like I said before, all of a sudden, the news came out that that was actually fake. There's no Trump senior advisor that said that. The White House denied that this happened, despite the fact that these headlines came out on X, CNBC, and Reuters. So keep that in mind. There was all this talk about how President Trump was about to delay his tariffs, but then the White House denied that. That's why the market kind of pumped and dumped and came right back down. But then as time went on, despite more threats by President Trump on China and other countries like that, the market remained very resilient, and we still respected an uptrend, making higher lows, which is a good sign. The same thing with the QQQ. We made higher lows. We're holding the white trend line, so the charts look a bit more bullish. Now, I will talk about the key levels in just a couple of minutes, but let's first talk about President Trump's tariffs, okay? The first thing worth mentioning is that President Trump has threatened 50% tariffs on China, depending on some contingencies. Here's his exact quote right here. This is from his Truth Social page. President Trump said that yesterday China issued retaliatory tariffs of 34% on top of their already record-setting tariffs. Then he went on about how there's like a lot of manipulation going on. He mentioned that once again, he said before that by issuing these additional tariffs above and beyond their existing ones, they are abusing our nation. So he's saying China's abusing the US, and that they will be met with new and substantially higher tariffs over and above those that were set. So he's saying, and this is the important part, therefore, if China does not withdraw its 34% increase above their already long-term trading abuses by tomorrow, April 8th, 2025, the United States will impose an additional tariff on China of 50% effective April 9th. So he's saying if China does not back down, we're going to increase tariffs on them. Now, obviously, the markets still remain bullish despite him saying that. So I do think that it's trying to see some relief. And we might see some relief tomorrow just temporarily if we hold some key levels. But then by April 9th, I would still be very careful if he does start to impose those higher tariffs. Then there was news that came out about how the European Union wants to increase tariffs with counter tariffs of 25% on the US in response to what President Trump has done. But now they're saying they want to negotiate, and President Trump is saying the same thing. He doesn't think they're doing enough. They want to negotiate. There's also news that other countries from like Israel to Vietnam to India, they also are willing to negotiate with the United States and President Trump. We're seeing lots of reports about that. So, anyways, let's talk about what President Trump just said. I have some quotes for you guys. These are his real quotes. I do this to eliminate biases. I don't want to show you guys what mainstream media says. I want to just show you what he said exactly. So, President Trump said, according to his transcript, we have come up with good conclusions with Israel's prime minister, and we have had great discussions with Iran and Israel. And he said that we discussed tariffs very, very quickly. He also mentioned that we're having direct talks with Iran. And then many reporters asked President Trump, are you going to pause on tariffs? And he said that we're not looking at that. We'll keep our great relationship with Japan. And in certain cases, nations will pay substantial tariffs. Japan needs to open up its nation more. That's what President Trump said. He said that we hope to keep great relationships with China's President Xi, and we have great relationships with them, China so far. Then he reiterated his 50% tariff if they don't necessarily cut their tariffs. So he's threatening them again. Then he said that we're going to get fair deals on every single nation, and there's going to be big meetings with us and Iran very, very soon. If there are no fair deals, nations can't participate in the US and would trade with us. And then he said that we're dealing with Iran directly, and the EU's response is not really enough, in my opinion. That's what President Trump said. He said that the EU is screwing us on trade. Maybe a deal will be made. The US has to be committed to buying a good amount of energy from the United States, and they will have to buy energy from us. That's what he said. We have to knock off the deficits, and the EU has to buy energy from the US. That's what President Trump said. Let's see what else is there. The EU has brought their tariffs off so far, but he wants to see the tariffs be reduced. And we're not doing business with Russia. That's what he said. And that's pretty much it. I'm seeing the same things being repeated over again. So that's what he said so far today. So he is willing to negotiate with different areas. He's expecting more from Europe, and he's saying that negotiations will continue. He wants to see tariffs to be decreased on the US. That's what he's trying to do so far. So one thing I mentioned on this channel is that the tariffs President Trump is imposing, right? We had that picture of him holding all these new reciprocal tariffs. They're not 100% guaranteed to last because it depends on negotiations as well. So we'll see how those end up going as well. Keep that in mind, guys. That's another very, very important factor. With that being said, I also want to mention that when it comes to our economic calendar, tomorrow is going to be Tuesday, April 8th, 2025. At 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the 3-year note auction coming out. And that's pretty much it. There's nothing else that's too crazy that's coming out, at least heading into tomorrow. So keep that in mind, guys. That's very, very important, at least for the way at which things are looking. And then on top of this, we also have some more interesting data to talk about later on. On Wednesday, we have FOMC minutes, but it's going to be quite minor. I'll talk more about that later. For more economic data, keep in mind we also have very minor earnings for Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday is when we have just like lots of retail, but then Friday gets very serious as we have big bank earnings, such as JP Morgan, BlackRock, Wells Fargo, and Morgan Stanley. On top of this, there's been some talks about how the Fed may be forced into an emergency rate cut and this and that. It's a possibility if the economy starts breaking and we get lots of bad news, but as of right now, nothing has been confirmed by the Fed from what I'm seeing. The Fed has not confirmed this, and there's no talk of an emergency cut yet from Jerome Powell. So keep that in mind. We're not seeing that yet. Now, there were some fears from Goldman Sachs, which are now estimating that we have a 45% chance of recession. But they also mentioned that if the tariffs are truly imposed, it's going to go up to over 60%. So keep that in mind. They're saying there's about a 45 to 60% chance of recession, depending on how things end up going. For the fear and greed index, this is the last thing I'm going to be talking about before I talk about the charts. We have it at 4 right now. So we're extremely fearful. The market's at extreme fear. We're seeing this all over the place. The put to call option ratio is exploding as everyone's shorting the market, expecting a big crash. And the VIX exploded to extreme fears. So fear is making up the majority of sentiment. Nothing has changed so far. Despite that, the charts remain resilient, and technicals are starting to look a little bit more bullish as the market is trying to see a temporary bounce. For example, if you look at SPY on the daily time frame, we're looking like we're a little bit more bullish. See how we kind of like dumped like this? Now we're trying to see some relief. If we get back above like 525, by the way, we do have some gaps to fall all the way back up to the 530s, but nothing's guaranteed until we see how things end up going. So I know I repeat this all the time, and I know many of you guys know this, but not everyone does. I can't predict everything perfectly every time because of all this tariff talk. It's very difficult to do that. But I can tell you the 4 hours looking a little bit better on SPY. And we're nearing a PPO crossover, so that's looking kind of good. And going to the 30 minutes time frame, we have a very, very clear looking bullish wedge that's forming. So just to be safe, if you're a bear on SPY, if you think the market's going to crash tomorrow, you want to see us lose 500. If 500 fails us, I'm looking for 494, then eventually these lows. If 494 specifically fails, yes, we're going to be dumping, guys. It's not going to be looking good. That is the bearish case in case we get a bad piece of news with the tariffs. If we get good news and if the market holds up, for example, if President Trump announces a good deal or something like that, hypothetically, and we continue to hold this white trend line, see the white line, we held it, bounced many times. We're looking for an attempt for essentially the 520s to 525 area as a bullish case. So that would be bullish if we start pushing and we hold this. What is looking more probable? Well, honestly, we dumped so hard. And even though President Trump was threatening higher tariffs on China, we didn't really see that affect the market yet. So just for tomorrow, and I know that there is going to be a much larger downside risk in the longer term future. I'm not saying it's over yet, but for the short term and just for tomorrow, there's a good chance SPY might try to hold this. If we could hold above 510, we're looking for an attempt to push for about 520 plus or back up towards the highs. We know SPY is capable of going to higher levels. Look at what happened today with this wick. SPY touched 523. So we might be trying to return up there if we continue to hold this wedge. And if we get a breakout above 510, that's the more bullish case. It looks a bit more probable. So we'll see just to be safe. For the QQQ, we're looking bullish. We're actually making higher lows right here over and over and over again. But just to clarify one thing, guys, we're going to be watching to see how this ends up going. So if you're a big bear, if you think the market's going to crash, just hypothetically don't really support this wedge. We want to see this lose 420. Very psychological, funny number. If 420 fails us, then this dumps for 413-ish, then eventually back down to the low 400s. If we're bullish, if you're a big bull, if you think we're going to be looking for some more upside, we're looking for this. You want to see us make higher highs and higher lows over and over again and form a nice wedge just like this. So this is going to be our resistance, a break above 430, and this thing is going to be setting off for almost 440 as a potential target. That is the more bullish case. The bullish case looks a bit more probable right now as we're trying to see some relief. And because of how resilient the market is looking despite more threats from President Trump against China because of the fact that they increased tariffs in the US. So despite that, the market's looking resilient and the bulls have an edge so far. So that's looking a bit more probable, but watch your levels just for confirmation going into tomorrow. The exact same setup on the IWM Russell 2000. This is going to be the last ETF I talk about. We are forming a bullish wedge as well like this. If you're a bear, you want to see us essentially lose 179. If that fails us, we could be dipping back down to 175. If you're a bull, however, you want to see us just maintain this wedge and eventually break past 182. If that breaks, we're looking for an attempt to get back up to the highs from 185 to about the 190s. It does look a bit more probable to me, so watch and see if that ends up being the case. For ES, we're looking a bit more bullish. We're actually making higher lows right now, forming a very, very beautiful wedge. I think we're doing a good job trying to break past 5150. If we break out of that, we're looking for the 5250 to 5300 area as the bullish case for ES. If you're bearish, if you're bearish, you want to see us lose 5060. If that fails us, we're looking for a dip back down towards the 4800s. If we get a big rejection, we end up losing 5060, we could turn back down. Now, one thing I like is that we have a triple bottom. We bounced here, and we're making a bullish wedge-like structure. So like you could draw it out like this, see how the wedge is forming. So this is looking bullish, and we are favoring an attempt to push for 5300 if we get that breakout. For NQ is looking a bit more bullish. If we lose 17,388, we could be dipping back down towards the low 17,000s. If we hold support at 17,388, we're looking for more upside. We have a nice triple bottom right here, which we're doing a good job at forming, and we could be forming a wedge like this. So this is going to be our resistance at 17,800. We're going to be going like this. This is forming a wedge. Hold and then break out of this resistance. So this is where the resistance line is. Break this, and we're going for basically 18,250 as our target or above. That's looking pretty good so far. So I just don't want to see us lose 17,380. As long as we're above that, we're favoring. We want to be pushing for the 18,000s for now. Watch for confirmation. And as you guys know, it also depends when President Trump says how it affects the markets. As of right now, we look resilient, so we are trying to favor upside. Bitcoin has the same setup as well. If we lose 78,500, we're looking for a dump. As long as we break past 80,000, we're looking for 80,900, then 82,500 as well as potential targets. For Nvda, we have a nice double bottom right here. It also sort of resembles an inverse head and shoulders, and we have this imbalance over here. There's a nice imbalance over here, which would attract us higher. So nice setup on Nvda. This is what we essentially look like: a left shoulder. The head is like a double bottom, which is bullish, and we could be forming like a right shoulder before it tries to push higher for the 100s. That's looking more probable. If we lose, just hypothetically, 96, that is going to be our 50 EMA. We're looking for a dump back down towards 92. If we continue to break and hold above 98, we're looking for an attempt for the 100s. So watch and see how things end up going. For Tesla, Tesla's looking a bit more bullish. If we end up losing 230, we're looking for a dump back down towards 224. And if the wedge ends up continuing to hold, we're looking for this move right over here, forming a bullish wedge, a breakout. And we're looking for an attempt to get back above 236. So if we break 236, there's a good chance we push for the 240s all the way back up towards like 245 or so. And there's a good chance this is going to form if we do end up breaking past this resistance. But we're looking a bit more bullish. So give this the time it needs, especially as time goes on. There's a good chance we push for 245 plus. For Apple, we have like a triple bottom right here. If we break past 185.6, we're looking for an attempt to push for the 190s. And if we end up losing essentially 178, we're going to be looking for a move back down. What I like about Apple is that we have a triple bottom like structure, but we haven't broken resistance yet right over here around 185. We need to break that to start pushing up a little bit higher just temporarily. I know, guys, we could always dump more later, but for the short term, there might be some relief looking at these setups. For Netflix, the same thing is forming a double bottom, very similar to other setups we're looking at. We have to see if we could hold 866. If 866 holds, this is going to be looking for an attempt for 900. If 866 breaks, we're not looking good. We could be dumping back down to 850 or below. I'm hoping we form a nice accumulation. We kind of bounce off this and push for 900. There's a good chance that happens. For MSTR, basically we're making higher lows here. If we end up losing 265, we could be dipping back down towards 260 or below. If we end up breaking past 274, we're looking for an attempt to push up for the 280s. I want to see it break 274 for confirmation. We're not really there yet. We're still range bound. If we hold above 274 tomorrow, we're looking for a push. We'll see if that ends up happening. There is some potential in this. Celsius is very flat, very choppy. As you guys can see, it's been range bound going back and forth between some tight levels. So it might test 36 tomorrow, 36.5, and just consolidate. Not really much is going on with it as it's range bound. Supermicro, it looks like it's resilient, just like Nvda. If 31.3 fails us, we dump back down to 28. If we hold 32, we're looking a bit more bullish. There is a bullish wedge here, so it is favoring 36 a little bit more. Back up to this high, that looks a bit more probable to me. For Palantir, we're looking a bit more decent. It looks like it wants to temporarily bounce, so we need confirmation, of course. It's very simple. If we lose 75, this is going to be dumping back down towards these lows. If we could hold above 75, we're looking for a test of 80. If we could break 80, I do think we're going to be pushing higher for 85 plus, so we'll see how it goes, but I do favor upside a bit more. For Rivian, we have a nice triple bottom-like structure. If we lose 11, we're looking for a dip back down towards 10.8. If we hold above 11, we're looking for an attempt for 11.69. I'm favoring this is going to slowly uptrend for 11.69. SoFi is looking a bit more bullish. We have a nice double bottom here. I just don't want to see us lose 9.72. As long as we hold this, we're looking for an attempt to push for 10.7. Looks a bit more bullish to me. For AMD, we have a nice double bottom here in inverse head and shoulders. If we break past 85.03, we're favoring a push back up towards 88. If we end up losing 80, we're looking for a dump back down towards 78. This is favoring 85. If that breaks, we're going higher, so watch and see if that ends up being the case. For ARM, we have a double bottom here. If we end up losing 87.8, we're looking for a dip back down towards 84. As long as we hold 88, we're looking for basically 95 as a target. ARM is looking a bit better. I'm looking for 95, so we'll just have to see how this goes. For Coinbase, we're forming a bullish wedge as well on this. If we lose 157, we're looking for a dip back down towards 151. As long as we hold this, we're looking for an attempt for 165. I am favoring 165 as a potential target. If we could break past 161, it looks a bit more bullish, but we need some confirmation. Of course, I need to see us hold 157 just to be safe. On Amazon, I like the setup. Like I said before, we have a triple bottom-like structure. I do not want to see us lose 173. So long as we're above that, we're favoring 181 as a target. And if we break that, 185 is coming. I do think we're going to be testing 181 tomorrow. We'll see if it breaks. For Meta, I don't want to see us lose 512. If we lose 512, we dip back down towards the below 500. As long as we hold 512 tomorrow, depending on what President Trump says, all these other factors, always keep that in mind. But as long as we hold that, even through whatever is said tomorrow, we are favoring 535 as a potential target. We're looking a bit more bullish. This setup looks good on Microsoft as well. We're forming a bullish wedge. If we end up losing 357, we could be dipping back down to about 350. As long as we hold this yellow trend line, we're favoring that we might be going back up for at least 365 or above. For Google, we also have a bullish wedge. If we end up losing 148, we're looking for a dip back down for 146. This is also favoring a push back up for the 153 area. For GameStop, we're looking a bit more bullish. We have a nice double bottom right here. As long as GameStop does not lose like 23.3, I think we're favoring 25.5 or above. AMC wants to be pushing closer to $3. It looks pretty good in my opinion. DJT is trying to rebound. We need to see 17 hold. As long as that holds, we're looking for an attempt to push for 18.29. The VIX looks a little bit weaker. We're kind of forming a weaker trend like this. You guys can see we have this resistance. So there's a chance that if we continue to fall, we could be dipping back down towards these lower levels, and we could actually be dipping back down towards these lows over here. It might just be a temporary move down for the VIX, by the way. So I'm saying we might like temporarily dip like this, see a temporary relief. Maybe the market bounces a bit, but then later on, this could still blast off in the future. It could still see a big move up later on, which means the market may temporarily bounce, but then there could be another big rug pull coming later on. I hope that's as clear as possible. The 10-year is looking decent. I do think this is going to continue to fall as time goes on. The dollar has pushed quite a bit. It's at resistance right here. Might fill this gap, and we'll see if it gets a rejection. It depends on if 103.29 holds or not. So we'll see how it goes. Anyways, my view of the market is very simple, okay? Right now, the market is looking a little bit more bullish from a technical basis. We don't know everything President Trump and his advisors will say tomorrow when it comes to tariffs. So promises cannot always be made. But I just want to say that for now, we're looking quite good. Watch your supports in case we do lose them. So always be prepared for anything just to be safe. But from a technical standpoint, the market is looking a little bit more bullish. The QQQ closed green. We saw Nvda also bounce, and so did Tesla, despite starting off on a weekend. So I'm hoping that we see this continue going into tomorrow. I think the odds do favor that. And I thank you all so much for listening. Have a good day, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll be back tomorrow before market open to give you guys another update. Until then, I always wish you guys the best, and I'll see you guys very soon. Thank you for listening, and peace out.